Greetings again from the Boogie Down South Bronx. This is Jeffrey Cortez. I'm going to read another chapter from my book, Memoirs of Pastor Rajatabla, Pentecostal, Private Eye. All right, so we're up to chapter 20. Chapter 20. And those of you that are not familiar with the book, there's a description of the intentions of the book. It's intended to be somewhat humorous, and the description, yet somewhat respectful. It's description of the content you'll find in the description below, as well where you may purchase a paperback or a Kindle version of the book. All right, so chapter 20 is choking on lying mammon. So choking on lying mammon. And the New Testament scripture reference as an introduction is from Hebrews chapter 13, verse 5. Keep your lives free from the love of money and be content with what you have, because God has said, never will I leave you, never will I forsake you. All right, so those of you that are not familiar with the format of the text and the font of the book, well, the regular font is where mysteries are given to Raha to solve from concerned members of the neighborhood or nearby congregations. And with his clinical observation skills, he goes and pursues to find out the bottom line of the mystery. And then he reports back to them, as well as he memorized in his journal, which he has nicknamed Tabla. So that's the inside joke of Rajatabla. And here we go with chapter 20. Raha prayerfully sought God's wisdom regarding collaborating with someone who had become very successful with nonprofit grants. Benicio was a former drug-addicted thug who started from very humble beginnings, now had a thriving and fast-paced growing organization. He had been soliciting many small churches with attractive propositions. It was presented as a way to funnel monies from repentant moguls to the underserved communities, with ecclesiastical entities receiving blessed, hefty finder's fees. Benicio presented this as a theocratic strategy benefiting churches in disenfranchised, impoverished areas. He appeared to be well-versed in liberation theological jargon. Raha himself had come to believe through some personal experiences and studied sociological theories that there were healthy institutions that intentionally engineered ways to shortchange the less financially successful. He also understood that oppression can be exercised by any social economic group. One time, Raha was instrumental in unmasking a big-time religious figure who turned out to be a slumlord. This slumlord had been hiring three street thugs to harass and terrorize tenants. Now, a few years later, everything successful Benicio proposed sounded as an answered prayer for the needs of small local storefront churches, including Raha's church. Still, an uneasy Raha tried to confer with some of the other neighboring clergy on board with the Benicio blessing. They all told Raha that he should just power pray past his reserved mental clutter of anxieties and not look at the Lord's gift horse in the mouth. A year later, flash news stories broke out that Benicio was arrested for intentionally laundering monies for unsavory characters. Suddenly, any clergy that got involved with Benicio's organization began frantically calling Raja, seeking his counsel. They were hoping against hope to find a surefire ways to distance themselves from Benicio. Dear Tabla, another crazy divine appointed day. Last year, I prayerfully gave Benicio a hard pass on his invitation to join his collective of ministers benefiting from his nonprofit organization. Before making the decision to decline joining them, I visited Pastor Custodio's church. I occasionally visit the old preacher's small church to listen to his sermons for inspiration and insight. That evening, Pastor Custodio preached about the devil's modality of seducing. He then used a classic illustrations about a lustful billionaire and a beautiful moral woman. The sexualized Mongol proposed that he would give her millions of dollars so she could help others if she slept with him once. She thought about how this opportunity would fund her dreams of a worldwide ministry to the needy. The next morning, after his appetite for a beautiful young virgin was satisfied, he gave her $10. Outraged, she exclaimed, "What do you think I am?" He replied, "We already established what you are. What we now have is to settle on a price." Pastor Custodio concluded the sermon with, "Don't let the evil one misguide you with false and cunning hype. Stay sober through the true Redeemer." Well, I took that as a sign not to go forth with joining Benicio's organization. Turned out that the supposedly God-gift horse turned out to be a Trojan horse from the lying spirit of Mammon. My ministerial peers, unlike me, who joined the organization, called me, expressing worried about the reputation of their ministers and extreme anger toward Benicio. They seemed to think that I would, "I told you so," slap them silly. They bitterly anguished that they were seduced by a man from a spiritual breed described in Scripture, such as St. Paul's warning, which he wrote, "But those who desire to be rich into temptation and a snare, and into many foolish and harmful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evils, for which some have strayed from the faith in their greediness, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows." When I sat in our living room with Tesoro, I shared with her how relieved I was that I got guidance through Pastor Custodio's sermon illustration. Then my precious Tesoro threw a monkey wrench into how I processed the moment. She suggested that I should consider that it was Benicio who was first duped by the fathers of lies in this case. She reminded me of the times I myself tapped into Benicio's brain and resources way before he became a successful CEO. The many times prior to this sad phase of his life, he had come through to help members of our church who were in desperate need. Now I need to be there for him at his worst time, to be there for Benicio, not just to be another enabling yes man or a comeback bigger and better public relations promoter, but there as a Hesed presence, a redemptive love in the midst of ugly consequences. bendición y bendiciones.